Democrats versus democracy. That's what we're up against in 2024. There seems to be a plan in place, according to Matt Taibbi, to stop Donald Trump again and take down any other candidate who stands in their way to maintain control of the White House, regarding who's running. Ahead of the curve, as always, is Matt Taibbi. He asked in Racket News, something he founded, whether the fix is already in for 2024. Well, new reporting from the Washington Post tells us his instincts were right. The Democrats are pulling out all the stops to thwart third-party candidates at the very least. The DNC has hired a comms advisor specifically to counter any potential spoiler candidates. And there are many third-party contenders. And Biden-supporting groups are thinking up new coalitions to coordinate against the threat of the democratic process. So, when did the Democrats become so anti-Democrat or Democratic? Let's ask former Democrat, Lieutenant Colonel herself, Tulsi Gabbard. Great to see you, Tulsi. I saw your training also, so yes. I know you're in top condition, mentoring your troops. First off, are you alarmed that a plan might be in place already to make Trump, not so much if he loses not so much to beat him at the ballot box, but beat him in courtroom?
Yes, it's extremely alarming. And I think that it's important to look at what they are doing now. They've got a plan in place for every phase of this election. They're acting as though they are dictators, and yet they're doing it in the name of democracy. When you look at what just happened in Russia recently, there was an anti-war candidate that stood up and said, I'm going to run against Putin. He's building a huge followership. What happened? The Kremlin said, nope, you're not allowed to be on the ballot. We look at what's happening here right now, how the Biden-Harris administration, the Department of Justice, all of these different entities are throwing everything they can, different states, at trying to keep we, the American people, from having the freedom to choose who we want as our next president, commander-in-chief. And
Tulsi, I'm sure you've seen the polls. The former president seems up by 4 or 5 points, winning in every battleground state except Wisconsin. But now we're seeing these headlines just about everywhere. Trump is a dictator. Trump will use the military in dictatorial ways. And Leon Panetta, William Cohen speaking out, saying what he's capable of, that democracy is indeed in the balance. I know you have to campaign hard, but they're trying to put fear in the American people.
Yes, yes. The irony is they are doing exactly what they are warning the American people that Trump will do if he is elected again. I just want to remind people, look back at 2016 when Trump was elected president. He would have had the opportunity to do exactly that. He could have gone and used our Department of Justice to go and throw Hillary Clinton in jail. Did he?
No.
No, he did not. He didn't do these things that they are warning the American people about. So I think it's important for all of us to be reminded of the truth, look at what they are saying and match it to what they are doing. They're undermining our democracy and going against the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence that says we, the people, get to choose who we want to serve us as our president. So,
Matt Taibbi, I don't know if you know him, investigative journalist. He's not on the right. He's certainly not on the left. He doesn't have that reputation. He's right for the Rolling Stone. But here's a quote from his column, which I found so alarming. He says, protect democracy. Democracy is already being canceled. For over a year, the Biden administration and its surrogates have dropped hint after hint that the plan for winning in 2024 against Trump or anyone else might involve something other than voting. The Biden campaign, stuck in seemingly irreversible poll free fall, it's going to get worse, by the way, has put all its rhetorical chips on the protecting democracy, voters by voting, protect democracy. A politician who claims to be doing the job for us is up to something. The group in the current White House is trying to steal for themselves a word that belongs to you, meaning the American public.
Right.
They're taking it as them. And the people behind it, John Podesta and Mark Elias.
Yeah. Yeah, they've been at this for a long time. The thing that really sticks out to me most about that quote is they claim to be protecting democracy on behalf of the American people and the voters, and yet they're the very ones who are terrified that voters will go against them, take away their power, and choose the person that they feel most threatened by, which is President Donald Trump.
I want you to take a look at this poll of Hispanics and blacks right now when asked about how they view the Democratic Party. In 2020, 66% approval. It's down to 47. Hispanics down to 12. Head-to-head, Trump and Biden. It was, I think, Trump or Biden +1.
Yeah.
What's going on?
Look, they are Americans like the rest of us. They feel the way that the rest of us feel, that these people who are in great positions of power, the most powerful positions in the world, are trying to take away our right to vote. They are just as concerned as the rest of us about the Biden-Harris administration's open border policy, the increasing and rampant crime in our communities and small businesses having to shut down. They are just as concerned as the rest of us about how almost every single thing costs more. Whether it's at the grocery store, rising inflation, and just basic cost of living. So it's not surprising to me to see that these different demographics that the Democratic Party has relied on and frankly taken for granted for so long, that, hey, they're on our team, we don't have to worry about them. Right. They are seeing the same thing that the rest of us are. And
first a Democrat, now an independent. Would you ever consider joining Trump on the ticket?
I would. I'd be open to that conversation. My goal and my interest is to serve the American people and bring my experience both in foreign affairs and having served in the military for over 20 years, having served at every level of government in our own country, to actually work to solve problems, the very problems that we are pointing out that are getting worse and worse under the Biden-Harris administration.
All right, pro-American. It's not about party, it's about the country.
Absolutely.
Tulsi, great to see you in person. Fantastic.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.